Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of If She Knew, a podcast where we talk about mental health, vulnerability, and all sorts of real life experiences that a lot of people go through but don't really talk about. So, I hope that you guys are having a great week. I'm really excited for this week's podcast. Sorry about last week's podcast. We had a little bit of a surprise move come up. We were planning to move this weekend, but we had to do it a little bit earlier, so things kind of got shifted around. So thank you for your patience, and I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. We were lucky enough to have a conversation with Becca from Becca's Day, all about her healing journey. She's talking all about her healing from heartbreak and how she's sharing that experience on social media and through her guides to help other people. As always, if you haven't already, go ahead and follow. This is a little bit new. We are following at ifsheknew.pod on Instagram. And then my personal Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube is tierney.erin. So that's TIERNEY.ERIN. So I know that's a little bit new, but if you go to any of my Instagrams, you can find links to pretty much everything, my Spotify, YouTube, Instagram. I also want to shout out Becca because she was so kind, super genuine, super sweet, and she gave us a discount code to her Trust the Process guide, which is a guide that shows you all about healing, and it has journal prompts, affirmations, activities to help with people that are healing from any kind of broken relationship, whether that's heartbreak from a romantic relationship or friendship or family situation, and she made it out of her own experience from what she's gone through in her healing journey. So it was originally $20 and now it is currently on sale for $10. And if you use the code IFSHEKNEW, you get an additional 10% off. So I will have that link down below for you guys to go check it out. If you want to look at the website, it's just beccasday.com and you can also find it there. Hi, everybody, and welcome to If She Knew. Today, we are joined by Becca, who is going to be sharing her healing journey and all the stuff that she shares on social media. And we are so thankful that she was able to join today. So to start, can you just share kind of what you share on social media and where people can find you?
Of course, yeah. So, hi, I'm Becca, and my social media is called Becca's Day, and that's across all of my socials: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I am Becca's Day on everything. And the primary focus of my account is basically to help people sort of move on from something, primarily being a heartbreak, but it could be anything that's kind of hurt you and made you feel like you kind of need to step into healing a little bit. It sort of primarily helps people to focus on themselves and start to build a really full, beautiful life for themselves and just kind of pour some really positive energy back into you after maybe going through something that challenged you a little bit.
Awesome. So I will put her at below in the links and everything so that you can find her. Also, I'll just say, I told Becca already, but I have my dog in here. So if you guys hear any noises, that's what that is. But so I kind of want to start by going from the beginning. So in the beginning of your post, you kind of posted about some health issues you were having. You had some thyroid problems and you were getting biopsied for cancer. Can you just talk about how that affected your mental health, how you're feeling at that time? Because I know health issues can be really impactful in your mental health.
Absolutely. So everything that I experienced with the health issues around my thyroid actually kind of preceded everything like that Becca's Day was born out of. So Becca's Day, as you know it now, it was slightly different when I was going through like my health issues, but it's very similar. The core of why I started posting about the health issues and the journey I was going on is very similar as to why I started posting the kind of Becca's Day content as we know it today, in that I felt really lost and really alone, especially being a young female. Having issues with your thyroid is pretty uncommon. Like, it's usually people in their 60s and above that have thyroid issues. And I felt, although obviously I'm in England, so we have the NHS, they are great. I didn't feel like there was much of a support network in terms of understanding what I was going through, and what, like, you know, the options were for me and the repercussions. And as soon as anyone mentions the C word, you know, your brain goes to some really dark places. And I think just to manage that, I sort of wanted to find a community, which is why I started posting about it, find people who were maybe going through a similar thing, who I could chat to about it, which is why I sort of started posting about it in the first place. But I think that in terms of the effect it has on your mental health, it really makes you realize that nothing is more important than your health. Like money can buy a lot of stuff, and it can buy you great healthcare, but it can't fundamentally buy you your health. There's no money I could have paid that could have got rid of the issues I was having with my thyroid. And although luckily, like, it wasn't cancerous, I had a whole thyroid gland removed to get rid of the problem, and it totally rectified it. I definitely just felt like I wanted a bit of a base and a bit of a community to, just find a little bit of a common ground with people about it. But it definitely does affect your mental health, and it's so easy to get to, especially as an overthinker or a worrier, to go to worst case scenario. But before you realize that you've done it, you've kind of worried your whole life away. You've worried days away without any real results. And I know it's easy to say, don't worry about the stuff you can't control, but you really have to try and stay present in the moment of, what do we know today? And what I knew today was that I've got some issues, but I'm not really poorly. I don't have cancer. I'm okay. And it was just kind of taking it a day at a time. And I still have people today, this was years ago, who find those videos and reach out to me because they feel lost and confused. So it's definitely, I'm really glad that I posted about it at the time when I did.
That's awesome. I love that. I love when you get messages from people that see that. And I mean, that's the whole point of like my podcast, is like to try to help other people find something that they can relate to. So I love that you were vulnerable in sharing that. So your kind of page is all about healing, and becoming your best self. So this is stemming from a breakup. Do you mind sharing like a little bit about what that relationship was like, slash what that breakup was like, and how it impacted your mental health?
Absolutely. So I think that the actual relationship in itself is almost becomes irrelevant when you go through a breakup, right? Like the semantics and the ins and outs of the relationship don't really matter. And we have to remind ourselves that a lot of the time we look at that, especially in the early days of a breakup, through rose tinted glasses. And we think it's the best thing that's ever happened to us. And we've just lost the best thing that ever happened to us. But most of the time, I can 100% of the time that's not the case, because if something is meant for you, it won't pass you by. And if, you're something that's not meant for you, you won't be able to hold on to it no matter how hard you try. But after the breakup, I was probably at the lowest I have ever been in my life when it comes to my mental health, because I felt really lost. I felt really alone. I felt like life as I knew it had been ripped away from me. And so that's why I started Becca's Day, because I was just like, this can't be what, like, I can't be so hung up on this relationship or this person. I'm young, like, I'm healthy, and I need to make sure that I'm kind of taking responsibility for my own healing, so that my life doesn't revolve around this, and I kind of take responsibility for myself and start stepping into a more positive energy.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good explanation. And I love that you were vulnerable in sharing your journey, because heartbreak is like something that pretty much everybody goes through at some point in their life. And a lot of people don't really talk about it or share the like aftermath of a heartbreak, because they
No,
feel embarrassed or like awkward about it. So I love that you kind of created a place for people to like go and find somewhere that they can relate to and learn from. And I think that's really special. So thank you for doing that.
thank you.
So how did you first like hear about practicing like gratitude, manifestation, all that kind of stuff?
So this like way predates this like origins of the Heartbreak and Becca's Day, and where, like I said, Becca's Day kind of blew up when I started posting the Heartbreak content, but it did exist in a very small capacity before that, like a couple of hundred followers. And it was sort of, I've always been really into self-development and becoming the best version of yourself. And so I have been trying to kind of become the best version of myself for years, and that involved like going to therapy to actually get to the root cause of some of the reasons why I am the way I am, and the things that I don't love about myself. What can we do to improve those? But journaling, meditation, manifestation, they were all things that when I started thinking I want to become the next level version of myself, it's a case of thinking, okay, so that version of me, how does she act? And then how can I act accordingly to bring myself onto that like level field with her? So, she gets up at 6:30 and she spends half an hour journaling. She does some meditation. She practices gratitude, because I'm aware that like attracts like. And so if I want to attract good things and good energy, I have to make sure that I am vibrating on that frequency. And gratitude is one of the highest level frequencies that you can kind of vibrate on, and the energy you can sit in. So I was just write 3 things a day. Let's sit and write down 3 things a day that I'm really grateful for. And so it's always just been like baby steps and little things I can do to make positive changes, to build like a really nice morning and evening routine and start kind of being a more positive version of myself. So that's something that goes back like years and years, and stuff that I've done for a really long time, but made such a positive impact on my life that now it's just part of my daily routine to, if I'm feeling stuck or I'm feeling lost or I'm feeling really good, it's like I'll come and I'll journal on it. And it's just like something that's just formed a part of who I am at this point.
Yeah, I love that. That's super interesting. And I think that you kind of brought up a good point as well. It's like you see your future self and you want that, or your dreams, but that won't happen unless you start make changes in your life to reflect that,
Yeah.
which I think is super important. And I love that you mentioned that. So one of the things that I'm kind of curious about is that it can be really hard to create habits. How do you stay consistent in like practicing these things every day?
So I think the first part is taking like responsibility and accountability for yourself. Like one thing that you learn really quickly is like no one's going to show up and do the work for you. Like you have to respect yourself enough to show up for yourself. And it's like you don't have to do anything crazy straight away. It doesn't have to be, right, I go to reformer Pilates 5 times a week and I weight train 4 times a week and I drink 7 liters of water and go on a 10K walk. Like you don't have to become this wellness being overnight. It's like what little things can you implement and change that you can stay consistent with. So can you set your alarm 10 minutes earlier and make sure you don't snooze? Get up and do a 3-minute guided meditation. Can you get out and go on a 15-minute walk and get some sunlight? These little things that you can implement that you can stay consistent with. And it's that kind of classic tale as old as time. You're not always going to be motivated, but you have to kind of stay disciplined with yourself. We like, one of the things I like to say is we keep the promises we make to ourselves. Like they're the most important ones. And if you make yourself a promise that you're going to meal prep week because you want to feel better in yourself, Sunday night get that meal prep done. So it's like the little things that you can do to stay consistent, and just making sure that you hold yourself accountable to those, and slowly they'll start stacking. It's all habit stacking, and it'll, before you realize it, you'll just be like, oh, it's easy to get up at 6 because I've been doing it for 3 months, and now I don't feel groggy and rubbish because I've been doing it for so long. So it's just kind of making little changes that you can stay consistent with, and eventually there'll be a whole new version of you, because those 20 small changes that you've implemented have kind of changed you into a more evolved like version of yourself that you wanted to be in the start.
I love that. I think that's great advice. And I am curious if you can kind of explain. I know you said that you've been practicing this stuff for like quite a few years now. Can you kind of explain how you've noticed these changes, and like how you thought, how your actions were, how you lived your life before doing this, and like how you live your life now, like what you've changed, what changes you've noticed in like your mental health and stuff like that?
Yeah, totally. So I think the biggest thing for me is sort of like, I don't know, 5 years or so ago, before I started any of this self development, before I had therapy, before any of this, I see that period of my life as me sleepwalking through life. And I think so many people are in that position where they're just kind of going through the motions. They're not very self-aware, they're not really doing anything to improve themselves, and they'll probably complain about being unhappy, but then they don't do. And I was that person. Like, I wasn't happy with loads of things in my life, but I didn't really do anything to change them. So I just think that the way that it's changed my life for me is that being self-aware enough to make small, actionable, positive changes every single day, like 1% better. That's all you have to do, because, over time those all accumulate. I just think for my mental, like for your mental health, it's a good thing and a bad thing, because the more self-aware that you become and the more you want to improve, the more it makes you notice other people and how they're not self-aware, and you think, how can you be, ignorance isn't always bliss. Like maybe it is if you like, you're just going through the motions of life and that makes you happy. But to me, it's like I said, I just felt like I look back and I'm like, I was sleepwalking. If I kept doing I'd be in the same position now if I didn't make the positive changes that I did. And my mental health now is worlds away from where it was 5 years ago. And it's not like I had anything horrific going on, but we all have wounds, right? We all have things we need to work on, ways that we can better ourselves. Like healing is not linear. And there is no, to me, in my opinion, there's no end to healing. Like, okay, fantastic, you've done your 12 months in therapy, but like, what's the next thing? Like, there'll always be ways that we can be better and things we need to work on, things that will rear their head. We might kind of work through one issue and then it's like, oh, something new has happened, something new's reared its head. So I think it's a continual journey, but the more work you put into yourself, you will notice like tenfold how much more like content you are, how much happier you are, how much peace you more at peace you are. And that's definitely where I'm at. And I'm not at any end goal by any stretch, but I'm definitely on a really good journey with it now.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's like one of those things where you can just like the easy way is to just let life happen to you, just go through the motions. And I've talked about it before on this podcast that it's hard, but you have to make the decision. It's like an everyday decision. It's not like you make it once and, you know, so it's like something you have to think about every single day when you wake up, like that you want to make these changes
Yeah.
and work toward becoming better. And I love that your page really focuses on that. And going into that, you kind of have created some different guides to help people in this journey.
Yeah.
And I know originally you talked about like the Glow and Grow little series very early on. And now you have a guide called Trust the Process. Can
Yes.
you talk about like what is in this guide, how it can help people, where people can find it?
Yeah, totally. So, Trust the Process is my baby right now. I am so proud of that guide because it was basically my sort of 12 months of stepping into healing, moving on from a heartbreak. It was definitely a like ups and downs. I had to try loads of different things to see what fitted and what worked for me. And so what I sort of did was as I noticed this incredible community forming around me, I was like, okay, so other people struggle with this too. Like, other people don't know where to start with healing. Other people don't know how to move on. They don't know how to kind of step into healing after a heartbreak. They don't, they don't know how to go no contact with their ex. All these things that I was like, okay, so I experienced all of this. Loads of other people do. And I've gone through all the trial and error kind of so that they don't have to. So it's basically a guide. It's like your kind of one stop shop to expediting your healing journey. It has loads of journal prompts. It's got like build your own affirmations. It's got a no contact tracker. It has activities and things for you to do to process your emotions in a really healthy way and help you move on. And it's not we hate our ex and they're trash or anything like that. I mean, they might be. I'm sure there's lots of them out there, but it's more just like learning to let them go and get closure in a healthy way without needing closure from them, to kind of make peace with it. So it's if you want to kind of expedite healing, it's 50 pages filled with everything that I learned through my healing journey so that you can kind of take from that and apply it to yourself. And it's linked in all the bios on my social, but it's also available on beccasday.com, which is my website, and you can buy it there. It's only £10 at the minute as well, because it was originally 20, but I just want to make it really accessible and affordable to everyone to kind of start taking responsibility and stepping into healing.
I love that. So I will add her website link as well below so you guys can find that if you want to purchase that. Can you kind of say like, is this does this pertain to relationships that aren't romantic as well? Like, can you use this for broken friendships, broken relationships with family members, like things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, was born out of the ending of a romantic relationship and heartbreak from a romantic relationship, but the principles are the same in the breakdown of any significant relationship in your life. You have to process that. You have to, your emotions around it in a healthy way. I'd never experienced like a friendship breakup until probably about 12 months ago. I mean, friendships drift, right? That's really normal. Life changes and you kind of grow apart from people. But I had like a friendship breakup about 12 months ago, and that hit me really hard in a similar way to going through like a romantic breakup of like a romantic relationship. And I definitely used the same coping mechanisms, the same journaling methods, the same prompts to work through that. And I think similarly to a romantic relationship, we kind of view things through rose tinted glasses when we're in the situation, right? So you think the friendship was great and you're devastated that it's ended. But when you actually look back on it, there were probably things that weren't so great, things that weren't very healthy. And the universe has, or whatever higher power you believe in, whether it's the universe or God or whatever, has a really interesting way of removing things from your life when they're not right for you. People will come into your life for a season or a reason. And if someone comes and goes from your life, it's because you probably needed to learn something from that. And in hindsight, it won't be 5 minutes later. It might be 6 or 12 months down the road. You're like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. That's what. So, like, I don't look back on, and although it wasn't the greatest of relationships. I don't look back on my relationship that Becca's Day was born out of and have any like hatred towards it. I actually look back and I think, wow, like if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here. Becca's Day wouldn't exist. I wouldn't be able to help hundreds of thousands of people. Like there's so much good that came out of that relationship and it ending that in the moment I thought my life was over. But 18 months on, I'm like, it's probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And I learned so much about myself going through that.
Yeah, I love thinking about past events, like difficult situations you've been through, and just realizing, taking the time to look at how much it's shaped you into the person you are now, and just being grateful for that time, even though it's hard to get through, because you
Yeah,
wouldn't be where you are today if you didn't go through that. So I love that you talk about
absolutely.
that.
Like 100%. You need every single thing that you've gone on, like every path you've taken is forming you into the person that you need to be for whatever's coming next.
So with this guide, like how did you get the confidence kind of to start sharing and like putting it out there on social media? Because I know like a lot of people would be nervous of like criticism or failure to like start putting out there, especially because you refer to it as like your little baby kind of thing. Like it's really
Yes.
important to you. So like how do you get the confidence to put something out there into like a public platform where people can be, not always the nicest and stuff like that?
So I think by the time I launched Trust the Process, I was pretty confident in like what I sort of had to offer and I knew that it would help people. But right in the early days when I started sharing all of like my healing journey and the breakup, I'm like it was hard because I was like super vulnerable. Like people were seeing me in like states of emotional distress. I obviously like no one was ever doxed or named or anything, but people could look at my content if they knew me and they knew what I was talking about. They knew who I was talking about. And so I remember I went through a period where I blocked loads of people because I was like, I don't want people that actually know me to see me like this and it took me a little while to sit back and be like, me having these people blocked and me hiding this from people is not being authentic. And if I can't be authentic with myself, how can I expect other people to trust me? How can I expect the universe to believe in me and think that I'm authentic and send good things my way because I'm not even believing in myself? So I really had to check myself and be like, if I want something good to come of this, if I want to make Becca's Day my full time, like the dream is for it to be my full time income, for me to do my content creation and provide service to people and provide this kind of in whatever capacity that is, I have to be authentic and I have to be honest with the content I'm putting out and the people around me. So I sort of slowly started unblocking people and being like, if they see it and they have something negative to say, they're probably not people I want in my life anyway. I think that became really apparent. The people that, I'd hear were laughing at me or had negative stuff to say. I was just like, that's actually a really beautiful thing that they've shown me who they are because now I know that I don't really want them as a friend or I don't want them in my life. Like, let them look at my content. If they're choosing to look at it, that's on them. They don't have to follow it. That's the beauty of social media. You don't have to consume anything you don't want to consume. But I think it actually is a really like it's a really although it's a bit it's not doesn't feel nice at first, like, the first time you get like nasty comments, it's, you might it might get you in your feels. It might make you have a little cry because you think, oh, really? Like, do people, but like I would say it's like 2% nasty comments to 98% wonderful comments and helping people. And you just have to think, if this is something you want to do, to be authentic is really important, to believe in yourself, because if you don't, who else is gonna, if you don't believe in yourself? So, as they say, the TikTok trend says, post the silly little video, go for it and just put yourself out there, because you have literally no idea what could happen. Like, I'm 100,000 followers later, and I'm just like, how did that happen? It all just came from me sharing my journey and being really authentic and really genuine and really vulnerable, and people enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to share, like, the real stuff that happens in your life on social media because obviously social media for a lot of people is a highlight reel. So people look at people going on vacations or like all these happy things and think that everybody else's life is perfect and they're the only ones that have stuff going on. So I love that you share your experience and I think that it's one of the reasons that so many people follow you because you are one of the people that are sharing real experiences, which is super important in spot in spreading positivity and authenticity. So I think that's really great, and I love that you
Thank you
do that.
so much. Yeah, you are right. I think that's probably why so many people related to it, was because it's like it's not polished. It's not a highlights reel. In fact, it was the polar opposite of a highlights reel. Like, every other video I was probably crying in some capacity, like back in the when I was first working through everything. It was like the opposite of a highlights reel. And so I think that that's why people really related. And there isn't a lot out there for like heartbreak and healing, and so people definitely like related to it, and I think that's why so many, like, I found such a beautiful community in Becca's day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I kind of thought it would be a good idea to go through a few little scenarios of things that happen in relationships that you can kind of give some advice for. Um,
Okay.
so to start, it can be really easy for people to be blinded by love in relationships.
Yeah.
How can you, like, take a step back when you're in a relationship to actually analyze what's going on in your relationship, if it's healthy, if you're getting treated the right way, and what kind of questions should you be asking yourself to kind of figure that out?
So I think initially, if you're asking yourself those questions, there's probably a little bit of a red flag waving. If you're kind of starting to really question the fundamentals of your relationship, you need to take a little bit of a step back. And it's definitely easy in like the early days of dating someone and getting to know someone to sort of not, then you're not pretending to be someone that you're not, but you're putting your best foot forward, right? So as the kind of honeymoon phase ebbs away and you start to really get to know each other and see each other's kind of the uglier sides, because we all have them, we're all human. It's about understanding what you are prepared to compromise on and what you're not prepared to compromise on. And if you really find that you're upset more than you are happy, that's probably a red flag, and you need to sit down and think, you need to ask yourself, is this the way I want to be loved, or is this the way I want to be treated for the rest of my life? Like, not that you should ever settle at any age, but especially when you're so young. If you're in your 20s, you've got so much of life left to live, like so much. So it's like, is this what you want to settle for? And are you compromising or are you settling? Like, I always say to people, compromise is a really normal part of any healthy relationship. You are two grown adults, navigating life together, and you're going to have to compromise on certain things. But settling is very different. Like, settling usually ends up in someone being unhappy because you've settled for something that really you shouldn't have. It's not, poor emotional availability or terrible communication or these things that are like, whatever it is that's important to you, you have to sit there and understand what it is that's important to you, and whether you're prepared to compromise on that. And I think healthy conversations with your partner would always be encouraged. If they're doing something that bothers you or that upsets you have to have that conversation with them. But if it's really early on and you're just getting to know someone and already you have all these question marks and red flags, get out, because it's probably not going to get any better 6 or 12 or 3 years down the road. It's not going to change. So Yeah, I think it's important to sit down, to understand what it is that's important to you, and to decide whether you're prepared to compromise on that if that's something that someone is kind of showing you. I keep using the word red flag, but maybe a beige flag, rather than it being outright red. It's like, okay, so this person does that and I don't love it. It doesn't make me feel great. Can I talk to them about it? Is it something they can change? Is it something I'm prepared to compromise on? And just sort of not allowing yourself to be love bombed or breadcrumbed by someone's potential, because someone will always show you who you are. You just have to make sure you're listening.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that that's super important to, kind of look at not ignoring these feelings that are, like, coming up,
Yeah.
especially repeatedly, or if you've had a conversation with someone and they're still doing the same things. I think a lot of times you're right, like, people look at the potential of, like, "Oh, but, like, I could change him, like, he'll get better," and that's not your job, and
No,
it's just wasting your time away because a lot of times they won't change. Um,
no.
so yeah, I think that's really important. I also kind of you talked about settling a little bit. In cases where there's like one single friend and all of their other friends are either dating or married and they're just like, I feel like I need to like be pressured into finding a relationship and like settling down and just like whoever I can find as quickly as I can. What kind of advice would you give them to like be okay with being single and taking their time.
So I can pretty much guarantee that a lot of the friends that are in long-term relationships are probably jealous of you being the single one and just getting to kind of enjoy and embrace being single. It's actually a really beautiful thing to have the opportunity to be single, to get to know yourself again, to get to know what makes you happy, to be happy without someone, because cliched as it sounds, you can't be happy with someone until you're happy on your own. And to get to a point where you are really content just living your life, so that when someone comes along, they'll be a really beautiful addition to your life, but they're not a necessity for you to be happy, because that's where you end up in situations where heartbreak devastates you because you've probably been a bit codependent or anxiously attached in some way to that person. So I think embracing being single and making the most of it. You get to do what you want when you want. You are literally your own person just for you. And I think that again, it's sort of the settling. You don't want to settle, because you can almost guarantee that if you settle for something that you're like, well, they're not everything I wanted and they don't make me super happy, but I'd rather that than being alone. You can almost guarantee that relationship will probably end in tears, because it'll get to a point where you're like, I can't anymore. I can't deal with this treatment, or I don't it might not even be that. It just might be that they're not your person and you ignored that gut feeling because you were like, well, I'd rather be with someone than be alone. So it's just embrace it, because you don't know if this will might be the last time you're ever single. You might meet your soulmate next week, and then obviously that's a beautiful thing in its own right, but you'll never get the opportunity to be single again, to make the most of that time and to just really live life for you for a little bit. So anytime you feel upset, you're the single one in a group of friends, be like, well, they're probably jealous of you and the freedom and the life that you get to live as a single girlie or a single guy. But when you find your person, it will be all the more beautiful if you really embraced being on your own and being single and making the most of that time, just getting to know yourself.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of not putting all your eggs in one basket, like, not putting all of your joy and what makes you happy solely, like, in your relationship, in your partner, but finding things that, like, make you happy on your own individually that are yours. So, like, if you go through a heartbreak, you're not losing every part of yourself because you attached all of that to your relationship.
Yeah,
So,
I
I think
think
that's
that's
important.
super common with people that are anxiously attached, maybe have codependent tendencies. All your happiness comes from your person. Everything, like, you don't make a decision without checking with them first. Where are they, everything comes from them. And it does get to a point where if all of your validation that you need to be happy comes from another person, if and when you lose that person, you will be left in absolute pieces trying to pick, and you will put those pieces back together, but it's definitely that validation that you feel like you need from someone else, that hole that you're trying to fill by talking to other people or dating or with someone else. It's really important to kind of fill that void yourself. Otherwise, you will end up in another. I don't want to say it's toxic, because it's not. like to be anxiously attached, it's a wound in its own right that you know, to work on becoming more secure. Just if you were avoidant, you need to work on becoming more secure, etc. But it opens you up to a lot more vulnerability if you put, like you said, all your eggs in one basket and all your happiness depends on this one person.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent explanation of that. You talk about going no contact after breakups and like the importance of that in relationships. How can someone stay accountable in sticking with no contact? Because a lot of people will be like, "Oh," like, especially right after breaking up, like, you wanna text them or you wanna, like, call them or check in on them or see what they're doing on Instagram and, like, all of that kinda stuff. Like, how can you keep yourself accountable in creating that distance between you and your ex?
So I think fundamentally, like anyone that's been a Becca's Day OG will know that I preach no contact because it's the only real way you can start moving on from someone, really. Because what your brain currently believes is that you need this person to be happy. You need, every time you have some sort of contact with this person, you get a little bit of a dopamine release. So what the narrative that your brain believes is that you, like your ex or this person equals happiness. So you need to start rewriting that narrative. And the only way that you can do that is by going no contact, because every time you have contact, whether that's stalking their social media, that classes as contact, whether it's sending them a text, replying to their text, whatever, viewing their stories, anything, you're giving your brain that little dopamine hit. So you need to basically rewire your brain to a new story, which is you don't need them for happiness. They're no longer in your life and you don't need them for happiness. So anytime you want to reach out to them, it's a case of, right, okay, write the text in your notes, do not send it. Write it on a physical piece of paper, screw it up, throw it away. Put your phone somewhere where you can't access it. Go and do something else, call a friend. Just like, do not allow yourself to send that message. But if it's a case of them reaching out to you, it gets to a point where you either need to set some really clear boundaries with your ex, because it's hard if someone texts you, it's hard to not reply, but you know, you need to set some clear boundaries of, you know, you do not want to have contact with them anymore. And if that's something they continue to defy, that's when you then move into blocking them, whether that's on social or their number. And that might even be something that you do for yourself, right? To stop yourself, you know, block their socials because you don't want them coming up as suggested. You don't want to be tempted to stalk them. So get them blocked. And it's just, you have to keep saying to yourself that the longer you have contact with them, the longer it's going to take you to heal, the slower the healing process is going to be. And ultimately, like, you aren't each other's business anymore. You don't need to see what they're doing. They don't need to see what you're doing. You should not be in each other's business. And I think, like you said, the early days, the first couple of weeks, that's really hard to do. And it's like, from day one, just being like no contact is harder, like, you know, harder said than done. But that's why I put the no contact tracker in my trust the process guide, because it just helps you hold yourself accountable a little bit for not reaching out to them, not making contact with them, because it's until you cut that cord, you will just be kind of held in a state of not being able to move on from them.
Can you kind of explain a little bit more about what your no contact tracker is like?
So it just would, like, it comes at the end after the section that's like saying goodbye to them, which is like, it's just you working through it. There is no contact involved in saying goodbye to them, just to be very clear. It's all you working through it. And there's lots of like journaling and kind of affirmations, etc., through that section. And then there's the section of, you know, building some boundaries. And then, you know, do you need to block them? If you do, let's work through that together. Like, I think that you should, even if you ended on good terms. Like, it's so easy to continue to like stalk someone and stuff. And so it's basically, it's just almost like a grid, and each day you get to like work through maintaining like the no contact over an 8-week period. So it's like an 8-week no contact tracker for you to kind of hold yourself accountable, almost like a star chart. When you've been good as a kid, you get to be like, okay, I managed to not reach out to them today. Because it's, even if you get through 5 weeks and then have contact, you need to start from the beginning again. Like, it doesn't, it sort of negates all the hard work that you've done by having that contact until you're healed. And then, you know, if you pass them in the street in 12 months time, you might be a bit like, oh, that didn't feel nice, but you've not gone back to square one. You know, it's all kind of, it's just a case of holding yourself accountable and working through that process of kind of giving yourself the closure to no longer be involved in their life.
I love the star chart reference because I think that, like, even as an adult, like, people are like, "Oh my gosh," like, the gold star.
Yes, get yourself
Uh,
some stickers and put it in each square.
I love that. I think that would be super helpful for a lot of people that are going through any sort of relationship where they're trying to go no contact. I've done a podcast episode previously about going no contact with parents. So even with that, I think that would be really helpful. So definitely check that out. Um, so the last kind of scenario is a lot of people after they break up immediately kind of question like, did I make a mistake? Was it the right decision? Like, how do you learn to trust your gut, like trust your decision and like stick to it? Because a lot of people in the beginning will question like, oh, should I,
I think that's a really normal part of any decision making, whether it's like leaving a job or like whatever, moving house. Like, am I doing the right thing? It's really normal to question yourself. But for me, it always comes back to like trusting the process. I think you'll find I love that little saying, but you have to like, as I said earlier, the universe or whatever it is, higher power you believe in, will never allow anything to pass you by if it's meant for you. And if it isn't, you cannot hold on to it no matter how hard you try. So it's really leaning into that belief and that energy that if something's meant for you, it's going to come back. You know, it's really releasing your grip on trying to control something and trusting your gut and your intuition. Like, if you are the one that's instigated a breakup, there's a reason you've done that. Like, it's probably not a decision you've taken lightly. You've probably thought about it for quite a while. So you have to trust your intuition and your gut. I am massive on that. Like, your gut will tell you if you really just sit there and like get into tune with yourself a little bit, which that could just be like a 2-3 minute guided meditation just to really like focus on, what it is that you want and you need. I think that just, yeah, really believing that not necessarily your gut instinct is always correct, but there's a little bell that's going off in the back of your mind, and it's kind of being like, okay, there's something wrong here and I need to trust in my decisions and my instincts. And again, journal on it. Like, you'll find that a lot of answers will come when you sit with, and then by that I mean like write the question down and say like, I need some answers, and you'll often find that in a little bit of time they'll probably come to you.
Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. And kind of like going into that then, how do you know when you're at a point that you have done enough healing that you can start dating again?
It's obviously it's super individual to each person, but I think it's the gut thing. You just sort of know. Like, there was quite a long period of time where I was just like, the idea of talking to people in like a romantic capacity or dating people was just such a massive. I was like, absolutely not. Like, I couldn't imagine anything worse. And I think if you're doing it because you're trying to make yourself feel better or fill a sadness or a void, it's the absolute wrong motivation for going out and dating. If you're like, well, I'm a bit sad and lonely, so it'll make me feel better and make me feel validated if I swipe on an app and get some matches, it's the wrong like attitude to have towards it, and you are definitely not healed enough, I would personally say, to start doing that. I think as well, it's just being really aware of, if you're not over someone, it's so unfair to take that into a new relationship. Like, if you're not fully over the past relationship, and that doesn't mean all your wounds are healed or anything like that, because we will always have stuff to work on. But if you're still hung up on someone, it's really unfair to take that into dating someone new, because you won't be able to be fully in it with them if you've still kind of got some slight hang-ups on a past relationship. And it's just being aware of the issues that you're bringing in as well, which kind of comes back to the self-awareness. Like, I have issues that date back to childhood. We all have like our things that come from different relationships. And I also noticed some new things that were super fun that reared their head when I got into a new relationship that I'd never noticed before. But because of the past relationship I'd had, it had kind of given me some like new issues, traumas, whatever you want to call it, some kind of new things to work on. But it's just being self aware enough to not project them onto someone else and make them their problem, but to know how you can healthily work through them. But I just think it really comes down to make if you feel like you have a really lovely full life and dating someone would be a really nice addition, you're probably ready to start dating again. But if you just think I'm lonely, I want to talk to someone, still kind of miss my ex, miss that relationship, you're probably not in a position to start dating again. So I just think it's once you get to a point where you're content with the life that you have and you're no longer hung up on a previous relationship or a previous person, you're probably ready to start dipping your toe back into dating again.
Yeah, I love that you talk about self-awareness, like, being a focus because I've noticed just, like, in my own journey with, like, therapy and stuff that I have become a lot more self-aware and taking the time to do things like journal or go through a guide, and just reflecting on your own actions or, like, the way that you think through things, you become a lot more aware of why you're doing that or, like, recognize it, like you said, with other people, um, and, like, being able to, like, read people better than going into new
Yes.
relationships, so that way you can kind of figure out those red flags and stuff like that a little bit earlier on because you've made yourself aware of what to look for. So I think that's really important. And I always like to ask people if you could go back and talk to Becca when you first were going through this heartbreak, what would you want to tell her?
Ooh, what would I want to tell her? That it was going to be okay, because there was definitely a time when I didn't think that it was. Like, there was no light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I was never like so depressed that I like didn't want to be here or anything like that. But there was definitely times when I'd like go to sleep and be like, who cares if I wake up or not, because it's like super sad and my life as I thought it was going to be doesn't exist anymore. So I think I'd start off by telling her that not only is it going to be okay, but it's going to be so much better than okay. You're going to learn so much from this, and it's going to be a real blessing in disguise, because hindsight is 2020. So a lot of the things we explain away in the moment, when we look back, we're like, oh, that probably wasn't great. That person probably wasn't for me for all these reasons. So I definitely say it's going to not only be okay, but going to be better than okay. You will love again and you will be loved again, because that's a it's so crazy, isn't it? Like 26, you're like, no one's gonna love me again. I'm never gonna love again, and it's like, no, you will. Like, it's gonna be okay. But you don't think that. When you're in the depths of it, at the depths of heartbreak, you think the whole world is over. But I'd tell her that it was going to get more exciting than you could ever have thought it was going to. But you really have to lean into, like you said, the self awareness, taking responsibility for your own actions, because it's easy to blame everything on everyone else, isn't it? As well, it's other people. Like, if you're not self aware, everything's everyone else's issue. So, kind of being aware of the issues that I brought to the table that led to the downfall of the relationship and things like that, you have to reflect on that as well, which kind of forms part of my guide of, you have to take some responsibility for you as well. But yeah, I just give her a big hug, I think, and tell her, like, keep her chin up and keep doing what she's doing. It's going to be okay.
I love that. I think that's super great advice and something that a lot of people need to hear. So I think that's all the questions I have for you, but do you have anything you need to add?
No, I don't think so. I'm just so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for chatting to me. I've absolutely loved it.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, go check out Becca's Day. I will link everything below for you guys. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening to this week's podcast. I hope that you guys really enjoyed it and that you found a story or someone that you can relate to. I know heartbreak is a really relatable thing for a lot of people. Most people go through heartbreak, whether that's relationships in romantic terms or just family or friends. So I think this is really great, and she is super into authenticity and self-awareness, which I love. Again, go check out her Trust the Process guide. For an additional 10% off on this guide, you can use the code if she knew. And as always, if you haven't already, go ahead and rate the podcast 5 stars. You can do this by going to the profile page, hitting the 3 little dots, and then hitting 5 stars. It's really helpful for the podcast, and I really appreciate it. I hope that you guys are having such an amazing week. And I love you so much. Thank you so much, Becca, for coming on this week's pod, and I hope you guys enjoy it.